everyone. This is the Buckeye War Room, and I'm Jim Renacci, your host, former U.S. Congressman, former candidate for governor, and also former candidate for United States Senate. And the Buckeye War Room is talking to people throughout Ohio about issues that affect everyone, the voters, and the taxpayers in many cases as well. So today we have a special guest as well. Representative Beth Lear is going to join us today. Beth, thank you for coming on board.
Thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it, Jim.
Well, great. And I know you're new to the legislative world, but you're doing a great job. Can you tell the people, what areas you represent, what towns you represent in Central Ohio, so that those that don't know you get a good idea of who you are?
Sure. Thank you. So it's the 61st House District. 61st District includes right now the eastern part of Delaware County and the western part of Knox County. And some of the key areas would be Sunbury, Galena, Genoa Township, Centerburg, and Fredericktown.
Well, very good. I know those areas. I actually had business into those areas over the years in Westerville and Sunbury. So those are great areas north of Columbus. And Delaware County, of course, was a booming Republican county. It still seems to be Republican, although I continue to hear that it's getting tougher and tougher there, correct?
It's getting much tougher. Franklin County liberals are moving into Delaware County in droves. And Allison Russo is trying to redraw our district so that it's more favorable to her party. So we have a fight on our hands, but we're well equipped to handle it.
Perfect. Well, let's get right into some topics. It's an election year. We're not that far from an election, but I want to talk about three bills in the House that deal with election integrity, closing the primaries in Ohio. What can we do to combine these bills and get this accomplished? And is it possible to still do anything in 2025 with these bills?
I think we can get something across the finish line by the end of the year, but unfortunately, we needed to get something across the finish line before this fall election. So one of the bills that Representative Lorenz, my fellow Delaware Countyan, and I had was House Bill 437. There are actually three bills that have been introduced by Republicans to close this open primary system that we have. But we had a specific reason in Delaware County to try to work that issue. We had a lifelong Democrat who was a sitting judge, is a sitting judge, Judge Delaney. And when the legislature, prior to me coming in, chose to put party affiliation with appeals court judges and Supreme Court justices, she got caught. And she's in a Republican area, and everybody would know she's a Democrat, and they probably wouldn't vote for her. So she filed just before the filing deadline to run as a Republican. And that's a total lie to all of the people in the district. They would never have known that she was a lifelong Democrat. So House Bill 437 was designed to say, if you're going to change your party, you need to do it 90 days before an election. It's not that we don't want people to have the chance to change if they actually change their values, but not to fool the voters just so you can keep a job or get one. That's wrong.
Well, I 100% agree with you. And look, we really don't have primaries in Ohio in the true sense of a Republican and Democrat primary. I've been supporting closing the primaries because this is going on all across the state. And let's face it, you are what you are on election day. And we also know that, and this falls right with what you're saying, the state, that the code, the administrative code actually says you're only a Republican if you voted in the Republican primary the last two cycles. And you should only be able to run as a Republican as if you voted as a Republican in the last two cycles. Now, I got to tell you, we have a lot of Republicans that have been elected that have never registered a Republican until they run as a Republican. And those are the kind of things we need to stop. But your issue is even different. We had a Democrat who decided she couldn't win, so she registered as a Republican. And this just has to stop.
Yes, I agree. And thank you for your support on that. I know that you're very familiar.
Yeah, it's very frustrating. So I hope you're able to push this through. You know, I've spoken to so many legislators, both sides, the House and Senate. There's not one Republican that disagrees with them. By the way, I've talked to a few Democrats who also agree that this is the way it should be. The problem is the Democrat Party, what I heard from one Democrat member, one of your colleagues, is, well, I don't want it to be something that hinges on people voting. And I said, that's so ridiculous. And you would agree. What you're asking doesn't stop people from voting. It just asks you to register in advance.
Yes. Because if you're going to run as a party, you need to be part of that party, and your values need to represent that party. So even signing an affidavit to state that when you file, something to that effect, I think is really helpful.
Well, and I've said all along, it's comical. You wouldn't want the Pittsburgh Steelers deciding who the draft choice is for the Cincinnati Bengals, or the Cincinnati Bengals deciding who the draft choice is for the Cleveland Browns. And that's what we do when we have open primaries. We allow other individuals who aren't really affiliated making decisions for us. So hopefully you can get that passed and move through.
I hope so too. Thank you.
So let's talk about another bill, House Bill 445, the Religion in Schools bill. Explain it, tell us where it's at, and what do you think we can get accomplished, and if we can get accomplished this year.
So this is my colleague, Representative Gary Click's bill. He had joint sponsored it with then Representative Catrona, who's now Senator Catrona. What they were trying to do was change the permissive nature of the law that lets schools work with organizations like LifeWise that come to the school and pick kids up during non-instructional time, take them off campus to a church in this case, but it doesn't just have to be Christian. It could be any faith that wants to do this. And it allows them to engage in religious instruction off school property during non-core subject hours. And we had 300 parents who have been participating with their kids in this program in the city of Westerville. And some people in some of these woke districts have started pushing back and saying, even though in Westerville we have Muslim students allowed to leave class to go and pray during certain times of the day and to express their faith in school, and all we're asking for is to let kids leave school for a short period of time with parental permission to express and learn about their faith, the Christian students were denied that after doing it for, it was a year or two they've been engaging in this program. But a few people in the Westerville district did not want kids leaving school to learn about Christian principles. And so the school board, which is very woke, unanimously undid the contract that they had with LifeWise on Monday.
Wow.
So,
well, and I don't want to put you on the spot if you don't understand this question, but I was just at Wadsworth High School, which was local here, and I was standing there around 11 o'clock, and all these kids were leaving. They were just walking out of the school. They were walking through, and I said to the administrator there, I go, so where are they all going? And she told me, well, look, in Wadsworth, if you have a study hall next to your lunch, you can leave and come back 2 hours later. So how does that fit in with this bill? Because it sounds like they were going anywhere they wanted to go. They were going home. They were going wherever they wanted to go. This would just allow them. So it sounds like in Wadsworth they're already leaving. This would allow them to go to a religious facility versus just going home.
Yes, and they would be taken there. In the LifeWise case, they pick them up and they take them. And if I had finished answering your question, the first one you asked, the current law allows that. But the Constitution also allows that. So this bill, 445, changes that may allow to shall, because that's what our Constitution, the First Amendment is. The school, which is a governmental entity, as you of course know, is not allowed to tell a Muslim student that they can practice their faith, but a Christian student that they cannot. So that's what we're fighting for with 445, is just saying, well, if you're not going to cooperate with the permissive view that we gave you, which you should know under the Constitution, you need to let kids do this, then we're going to turn it into a you will, you shall. Kids need to be allowed to go if their parents sign a form that says they want them to go. So it's that simple, and it's unfortunate we have to go this route, but the schools would rather indoctrinate than educate, and we just need to make sure our kids have options that their parents want them to have.
Well, it is amazing, and I would agree with you. It always seems like there's an obstacle to allowing our children to either enhance their Christian faith or get more involved in their Christian faith.
Yep, you're right.
Let's move on to another bill. SB 104 was a bill regarding some minor modifications with college credit in high school. Can you kind of explain that? I guess there was an important amendment to it from the House.
Yes, so on the last day before summer break in June, we amended Senate Bill 104, which the auditor of state, Keith Faber, had audited the program, found that it just needed some tweaks. So Senator Strino and Senator Brenner put together Senate Bill 104. And it was a pretty easy bill to get through the Education Committee. What happened was Representative Adam Byrd, a former superintendent, and I had been trying to get House Bill 183 through the House. It's a really simple bill. It just says boys and girls cannot share bathrooms, locker rooms, or overnight accommodations, kindergarten through college. And we got it out of committee. The problem was the speaker was not allowing it to come up for a vote on the House floor. And we had parents from all over Ohio clamoring for this. We also had a letter signed by 40 superintendents saying, please, we need a state law that backs us up because the federal government is telling us we have to do this. So since Speaker Stevens wouldn't allow us to bring the bill up, Adam Byrd and I decided we were going to try to turn it into an amendment and amend the Senate bill on the floor and let the Senate concur and make it law. Well, the speaker still has to allow that. So he did finally give us permission to try to amend one bill, Senate Bill 104, and we succeeded. So it's over in the Senate waiting for President Huffman to bring it up, which I hear he may allow on November 13th, and the governor has already said he will sign it. So we're really excited about getting this into law before the end of the year.
Well, hopefully we can get that done as well, too. You know, legislation is so messy sometimes, and little things here and little things there really stop really good bills. And this sounds like a good bill that needs to get signed into law. So let's keep our fingers crossed that this thing moves across the line, too. Let's talk about another bill, House Bill 236. I mean, I love this bill, the Never Alone Act. Of course, Medina County's Representative Melanie Miller has been working on this. Give us a quick overview on the bill and where it stands, because this is another important bill that we need to get across the finish line.
So, first of all, Representative Melanie Miller has been just a joy to work with. She is so poised and so savvy. I'm just so grateful that she's my joint sponsor on this, and she led the way. And all we're saying is what every Ohioan knows. We can't ever again let hospitals or nursing homes let our family and loved ones suffer or die alone, even in a healthcare emergency. And House Bill 236 would just simply prohibit that. And it says you have to allow every patient or resident an advocate. It's not the same thing as a legal healthcare power of attorney. It's just somebody to hold their hand that they know who's going to be allowed to come in and sit with them or help them through a particularly difficult night. So we worked a lot with the Hospital Association on this, and we did make some changes at their recommendation. Some of the nursing homes were good, some were not so good, but we insisted that we have got to protect these people. And that's what we were able to pass out of the House, so it's in the Senate, and we hope the Senate will move on it before the end of the year.
Well, look, 2020 was a horrible time in Ohio. There were so many people that I still talk to where their mothers or fathers died alone in the nursing homes or even in the hospitals because they weren't allowed in. And so I'm glad that we're working on this. This should be common sense, though. If
Yeah.
my mom, and look, I took care of my mom for over a year here in Ohio. If my mom, if I want to go see my mom and she has COVID and everybody else has COVID around her, that's okay. That's my right. I wear a mask, I go in, I see her, I take the risk. That should be my right. And nobody should ever stop any one of us from being with our parents, especially during their last hours of life or the last days of life. So I'm so grateful that this thing is out there. It's sad that we have to legislate this, though. I mean, don't you agree? Some of this is just common sense.
No, you're so right. I mean, it's the same thing with the Protect All Students Act that says boys and girls can't share private spaces. I mean, it is common sense, and yet we live in such a crazy upside down world. We're having to legislate things that just 10 years ago would shock a person that we're even talking about it.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. Well, let's move on to another really interesting issue that's coming up this election a few weeks from now. Of course, it's issue one. We're a few weeks out. What is the pulse that you're hearing down in your district and in Central Ohio? Do people understand it? And what are the real ramifications of it? Now, I could tell you, I've been traveling around the state. Most people, even Republicans, don't understand it. They don't understand what's happening. So what are you hearing? What are you seeing in your district?
Well, we're educating people as much as we can. And we had a town hall here with Jack Windsor, who's an investigative reporter. He's done a lot of the legwork to prove that we've got foreign investment in our issues when people are trying to put constitutional amendments on our ballot. We've got foreigners who are actually helping fund those to the tune of millions of dollars. So he and Auditor Faber and I spoke to Delaware Countyans about this very issue. And my comments to them were, the left always lies, and the left is behind this issue. So of course they're going to tell you the opposite of what is true. They're going to tell you that if you pass this bill, it will end gerrymandering. But you and I know that if we pass it, it will ensconce gerrymandering into our Constitution and actually require that we have gerrymandered districts in favor of Democrats. And that's not democracy.
Well, and like I say, what's even worse, and I've been telling people this, it sets up a whole new bureaucracy. Look, I'm a big believer that the state of Ohio is already spending way too much money. I mean, in the last 6 years, we've gone from 60 billion to over 100 billion. We're spending much more than Florida in comparison to populations, almost as much as Florida, which is ridiculous. And yet now we're going to put a whole nother bureaucracy. So my argument is, if you don't like the current system, I get it. But let's come up with a system that at least is accountable, number one, is not as costly, number two, and by the way, whether it's this system, whether it's the current system, and I chuckle, everybody hires a consultant and a computer, and that's how they're drawing the district. So let's come up with, the legislature should come up, in my opinion, with an ideal way of drawing the districts, get that approved, get a computer programmer to draw the program, and then you end up with no bureaucracy at all. Wouldn't that be great?
That would be amazing. I think as long as it's a political system, it's always going to be a bit messy, don't you think?
Yeah, well, this is an issue, and what I've said, when the Democrats controlled things, they took advantage of it. When Republicans control things, so Democrats are mad now because Republicans have controlled things for a while. But you know what? Like anything, this state will flip back and forth. I know people don't want to believe that because we are even though people think we're a Republican state, you know this as well as I do, we're about 22% Republican, 21% Democrat, and a whole bunch of independents, 60-some percent independents. And in the end, these are the issues that are causing change. But my biggest fear, Beth, is that the independents aren't paying attention to this. And they're going to come into the voting booth, and here's what they're going to see. Citizens versus politicians, citizens over politicians. It's sad because, as you know, being in politics, if you can frame your opponent or your message and make it believable, you can win every time. So I hate to say this, they have the upper hand because they've framed this in advance, citizens over politicians, which is a great line. You and I know. You ran probably because you wanted the citizens to have more say-so in legislation in Ohio, and they've framed this as citizens over politicians, which means we have a real uphill battle to stop this.
We do. I've heard that you might be talking to our Secretary of State, and I will just pass along a message if you're willing. I think he did a phenomenal job explaining what that ballot initiative actually does. Not what the Democrat handlers wanted him to say, but the truth about what it does, which is gerrymander the districts in favor of one particular party. And we've already had this in Michigan. In Michigan, it was people, not politicians. It sounds very similar, doesn't it? Because the language is almost identical. And a federal court found it unconstitutional because it was gerrymandering. In fact, it was racial gerrymandering, and all of the black legislators in Detroit lost their seats because all of their Democrat districts were gerrymandered out into the lily white suburbs, and so white liberals took the seats away from the black Democrats. And the federal court said, that's a violation of the 14th Amendment. Here, issue 1 is doing the exact same thing in Ohio, and I hope Ohio voters are smart enough to say, when you had a unanimous commission, Democrat and Republican, that approved the current maps that we have, we may need to make some tweaks, but our system now is better than what the Democrats want to put in.
Well, again, Representative Lear, I want to thank you for coming on to the Buckeye War Room. I wish you, although I certainly appreciate all you do in the legislature, and I wish you good fortune this election, although I think you're going to be fine just because of the work you're doing. But thank you for coming on. Look forward to seeing you out on the road. And hey, let's not only win this, let's make sure that we defeat issue 1. Let's get you elected, and let's get good Republicans elected across the state of Ohio.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. Well, this is Jim Renacci. Again, what a great episode here talking about a number of issues. We look forward to having you not only listen on this one, but join us on all of our podcasts as we talk with interesting people around the state about issues that affect you, not only tax issues, issues, as I said, issue 1, all the legislative issues. We've got some really good people that we continue to talk to and bring forward, and we look forward to having more. So this is Jim Renacci signing off on the Buckeye War Room.